Welcome to your college-bound kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University. Good morning, friends. I hope all is well with everybody, wherever you are, whether you're in an international country, West Coast, Midwest, Southwest, East, Northeast, Plains, everywhere. Got an exciting episode for you guys today. But before I get into the meat of it, I want to start out by sharing something I keep forgetting to say on the podcast, which is we started a blog. And I know I've mentioned it once, maybe before. But Lisa and I, we're really writing a lot, and I keep forgetting to tell you about it. So I'm just going to go over the articles we've written so far. So it's like there's 17 articles that we've written so far. And if you like the verbal version of yourcollege-bound-kid.com, we're confident you're going to like our articles. They're pretty meaty. They have some great content. Of course, I'm biased, but some really good stuff. So if you were to go, how do you access it? You go to yourcollege-bound-kid.com. You'll see the blog tab, and I'm just going to let you know what we've got up right now. So I wrote an article on how to request letters of recommendation when it comes to your college articles or college applications. I also wrote an article on the difference between holistic college admissions and admissions by the numbers. Lisa wrote an article on the effect of COVID on the teenage brain. The effect of COVID on the teenage brain. That's great. I wrote an article on how you build a college list, 32 factors to consider. Pretty detailed. I think that could be really helpful for a lot of our listeners. I wrote an article called Common Admission Interview Questions. Now, what I did with this, one of the things I do is I prep my students for interviews, and then I asked them afterward what questions they were asked. So I've just gathered questions that my students that I work with have been asked in the last 3 years. And I put the most frequently asked questions here for you. So there's like maybe 40 or 50 commonly asked questions that students are getting asked in interviews. And Lisa wrote an article called Tools for Help with ADHD. I wrote an article called How Many Colleges Should You Apply to? Lisa wrote an article called Parents' Perfection in College Admissions. I wrote an article, How to Prepare for a College Visit. If you want to know SAT dates, calendar for the year, we've got that up there. You want to know ACT calendar dates for the year, we've got that up there. I wrote an article called Junior Year. Basically, what should you be doing now, getting ready for college if you're a junior? And then we have a FAFSA walkthrough up there. We have a CSS profile walkthrough. Also wrote an article called Why Students Who Transfer Usually Take Longer to Graduate. Another article, When It Comes to Searching for Outside Scholarships, Have You Looked at Your Community Foundation? And then another article called Excellent Questions That You Can Ask If You're in an Interview. So we just want you to, we're doing this for you guys. I want you to take advantage of it. And it's our fault for not letting you know it's up there. You just go to your college-bound-kid.com, and right in the center, you can't miss blog. Speaking of which, YCBK Plus, we send it out once a month. We're sending it out Tuesday. You can get it delivered straight into your inbox. All you do is go to your college-bound-kid.com, and you'll see the sign-up sheet, and you'll get Tuesday's version. Well, this month's version, actually, January's version. If you go and you do that today, if you're listening. If not, we'll catch you next month. But once again, we're putting together a series of things, some blog articles, some popular interviews, some spotlights, some tips, just a little potpourri of everything there for you in the newsletter. So something new. It's only the second edition to go out, but We're excited. Okay, friends. Going to do something a little different today. Normally I do higher ed updates, and I kind of give you 4 to 6 things going on in higher ed. But there's a pretty big announcement that went down this week. And so I'm going to allocate all of my time to one simple announcement. And that announcement happened on January 10th. If you're a regular listener of this podcast, you know I've been mentioning that it was going to come. And that announcement has to do with Biden's new IDR, or income-driven repayment plan. Now, what I've said in the past is that I'm expecting, and I'll be very happy to be wrong, the Supreme Court to overrule the loan forgiveness plan that Biden tried to push through, 6 months or so ago. I think it's going to be seen as unconstitutional. I think they're going to say that the president, doesn't have that much authority without getting Congress when it comes to budget. So what I've been predicting is that as soon as they overrule it, Biden's got this plan he's working on, this revised income-driven repayment plan, which has potential to be more impactful than the original loan forgiveness plan. And I've been expecting them to wait till the announcement and then roll it out. Well, they went ahead and announced it on January 10th. And so what I want to do today is go over it, because it's pretty significant in terms of its scope and its scale. And for a particular kind of borrower, namely someone who borrowed federal loans for undergraduate, this is a big improvement on previous income-driven repayment plans. So I'm going to assume you don't know anything. You're listening for the first time. I want to just start with the basics. So one of the benefits of using federal loans as opposed to private loans is the flexibility when it comes to repayment. There's lots of flexibilities built in. There's something called forbearance that's built in. Okay, if you're having problems, with your loan. And there's also flexibility when it comes to how you can pay back your loan if you just can't afford it. So let's say, for example, you have $30,000 in loans and you're unemployed, or you have $30,000 in loans and you're making less than $30,000. Like, how are you going to pay that back? And we know that these loans can't be discharged in bankruptcy like other types of debt. So in the past, there have been other what are called income-driven repayment plans, meaning you set up a payment plan with your loan servicer, and as long as you fulfill the requirements, after you fulfill the requirements over a certain number of years, then the balance will be forgiven. But there have been problems with those past income-driven repayment plans. One of the problems is that in many instances, the amount people were paying was less than the interest that was being accrued. So you're making a $200 payment and the loan's just getting larger and larger and larger on you. That created a lot of problems. One of them was high default rates. After a while, people were like, bump this. Why am I even paying it? I'm going backwards, not forwards. So there are 5 key improvements or changes in the new plan. I want to highlight them today. First key new provision in this plan is that monthly payments are reduced to 5% of your discretionary income. Wow, that's exciting. Under what's known as the current version of REPAY, REPAYE, which is an acronym for Revised Pay As You Earn. Revised Pay As You Earn. There's a lot of alphabet sloop I'm throwing at you today. It's one of the IDRs, income-driven repayment plans, out there. It's not the only one, but REPAY is one of the popular ones. Under REPAY, the current version, monthly payments are calculated at 10% of discretionary income, not 5%. Furthermore, discretionary income is defined as income above 150% of the poverty line. Okay? Now, what does this practically mean? Well, I know this is going to shock people, but the poverty line for a single family of one is $13,590. Yes. So poverty is like bare subsistence. I mean, we're talking ramen noodles and free rent. I mean, how you can live off about $1,000 a month is beyond me, but that's what's considered the poverty line. So 150% of the poverty line is $20,400. So what does that mean? It means that in the current plan, the first $20,400 you make is protected from what you would use to figure out what your monthly payment would be. It's shielded. So it's subtracted. It's as if you didn't make it. So if you had an income of $40,400, subtract that $20,400, and it would be $20,000 would be your amount above the poverty line. That's under the 150% guidelines for a single borrower. So what does that mean? Well, if somebody had a really low income, like $25,000, they'd only pay $38 per month or $460 a year. That's under the current plan. But the new plan is significantly better because you can have a much higher income and an income-driven repayment plan still makes sense. So first of all, going to capping it at 5% of your discretionary income instead of 10% immediately slashes what you would pay in half. 5 is half of 10, right? And then this is really significant. The federal poverty limit, that's not changing. Still $13,590, that's set. But in this new plan, you have to be above 225% of the federal poverty level before the amount of income you have is expected to be used in what your monthly payment's going to be. So how much is that? We're talking about $30,500 for a single individual. The first $30,500 does not even go toward your discretionary money. It's shielded. It's protected. What does this mean? It means people with much higher income levels are going to benefit from this. All right, next key point. If you're in a zero monthly payment category, which several low-income borrowers are, I mean, if you're making under $30,500, you have no discretionary money in the new formula, so you're gonna, you have nothing that you can contribute, and that's for a family of one. For a family of four, it's $62,400, which is basically the national average. National average for income is right there. So if you're right at the national average, family of four, you have zero monthly payments that you have to make. And this is while you are accruing time toward your loan forgiveness. Okay, that's huge. Third, this is really important as well. No interest accumulation while you're making regular payments. Remember, I talked about the fact that one of the big problems before is that you might have a $200 payment, you're accruing $250 of interest. Well, under this new repay plan, the government's going to subsidize the interest accrual. So this is huge. So you're not going to be seeing your balances grow. And that's going to also decrease the default rate, because one of the big reasons people were defaulting, and I'm never going to pay this thing off anyway, so why do it? So this is huge. This change would eliminate additional interest after a borrower's monthly payment is applied. And this also applies to people who have zero monthly payments, no additional interest. Fourth key point, much easier path to loan forgiveness. Under the current existing repay, this is a little bit of a tongue twister, existing repay plan, remember that's revised pay as you earn acronym, borrowers are eligible to have their loan abrogated or forgiven after 20 years of monthly payments for undergraduate loans or 25 years for graduate or professional loans. Biden's proposal will consider the original loan balance to determine forgiveness eligibility. So those who borrowed $12,000 or less are going to be eligible for loan forgiveness after 10 years of monthly payments. Every $1,000 borrowed above that amount would add 1 year of payments before forgiveness eligibility. So this is going to be a lot better for loan forgiveness. In addition to this, the proposed change is going to allow borrowers who entered into deferment. There's deferment and forbearance. These are times when you put your payments on pause for a number of reasons. It could be you're underemployed. It could be an illness like cancer treatment, or it could have been military service. This time when you are in deferment is going to count toward your forgiveness time. And currently, it's only extreme economic hardship that allows income-driven repayment plans to count toward forgiveness. But now it's going to count military service and other things, and sickness and illness. All right. Borrowers can also consolidate their loans. This is also a really big point. And consolidating loans means you have a bunch of loans and you put them together. So what happens is with the federal direct loan, you're actually taking out a different loan every single year. So in the past, if a borrower decided to consolidate their loans, they reset their clock counting toward the amount of payments that they had to make before loans were forgiven. Now, if loan consolidation occurs, you do not reset your clock. The past payments you make also count toward loan forgiveness. So it's just a fantastic new plan. In addition to this, automatic enrollment is also going to occur for at-risk borrowers. What happened in the past is a lot of the most risky borrowers, they didn't enroll in the program, for a lot of reasons. I mean, they might not have internet. They might be struggling in the most extreme cases, living out of a car. I mean, lots of different scenarios. Now they're going to get automatically enrolled and moving toward the clock for forgiveness. So it's really, really significant. And the new plan is going to make old traditional advice about paying back debt antiquated or archaic. In the past, basically, you were encouraged to, pay back debt as soon as possible, and that was in your best interest. Now, the new strategy for a lot of people, even incomes up to high five-figure incomes, is going to be reduce your adjusted gross income. So let's say you're making $80,000. If you could give $20,000 to a 401k, that reduces your adjusted gross down to $60,000. And let's say you have a high-cost health plan. You can be eligible for an HSA, healthcare savings account. That's another thing that adjusts your adjustable gross income. Now your adjustable gross income, let's say you get it down to $52,000, and the first $63,000 is protected if you have a family of 4, and you're on the clock to having the balance wiped out. Now, who this is not going to benefit that much? People that have a lot of graduate student debt. The plan Biden has is really targeting undergraduate debt. Also, really high income earners are not going to benefit as much. It's still going to be better for them to make, just to go through the traditional way. So that's a little bit. It's an update. And I thought I'd take the whole entire episode today, preamble, if you want to call it that, to go over that, because it's a pretty big development. And most people think it's going to survive any constitutional challenge.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Okay, friends. Hopefully you got to hear Hillary Dickman last week. We got a tremendous response. Hillary's up 3 weeks in a row. She's an assistant director of Colorado College. We're talking about 3 completely different topics. And today it's a redux. I'm pulling out what was probably my favorite episode early on, and we did, episode 56. And you can go back and listen to that. By the way, Dave's on there as an interview on the back part. But if you listen to the question segment starting around the 30-minute mark, I did something to sort of help people understand the level of competition they're up against. But you know what I realized? That's the end of year 1. We're about to start year 6 here in a couple weeks. That was 5 years ago. So it's time to bring it up with a modern version, and Hillary and I have that discussion. We hope you'll find it to be really helpful. Listen and enjoy. So let's transition to a completely different topic. It's another one of our great conversations that we had. And I think it was when we had this conversation that I said, Hillary, you need to come on the podcast. I really need you to share this with the listeners. So I want you to kind of walk through how you've taught your, daughters, particularly your second daughter, how to think of the available spots that are there for her based on your knowledge of admissions, and how you've sort of combined that knowledge to explain to her that a school might have 2,000 people. They might take 500 each year, but there are not 500 spots available to you. So why don't I'll just throw it out there and you take it where you want to go with it.
Yeah, well, you really planted this seed in me probably 3 years ago. I remember at some point you were talking about the buckets that are available to a student, and you kind of went through some basic math of, well, I think you used maybe Amherst as an example. Like if Amherst admits 2,000 or whatever, I don't remember however many students they admit, only half of those are going to be female. And of those, a lot of those are going to be athletes. And then of what's left, and you kind of kept going and bringing the number down. And it made an impact when I heard you talk about it. But then when I started working in admission, I was like, oh,
I see it now.
I get this now. So, I mean, I have always enjoyed, not always, but for the last like 6 years, probably enjoyed reading the common data set for any
Sure.
school that my kids have been interested in. And I like numbers. I don't really like doing math, but I enjoy numbers just generally. And the common data set brings you so many numbers to work with. And so having like combining what you taught me with sort of what I experienced in admission when my younger daughter Callie started looking at colleges, she was looking at some selective liberal, highly selective liberal arts colleges. And so as we would go to visit these colleges, I would always be reading the common data set the night before. Like I'd be sitting on the hotel bed with my computer and with my notebook reading the common data set, and like
you are a true admissions person. You're proving it.
I know. She would be doing something totally unrelated, and I'd keep like saying, hey, look at this, and we would kind of go through it together. And the next day we would go to an info session, and I would know the answers to questions that admission officers wouldn't know. And I'd be like, why didn't they know that? It's in the common data set. So that's one way that I use the common data set. But the other way was to figure out really like how many spots are available for my daughter at this college, because I want her not just to see the 15% or 10% or 8% admit rate. I want her to be able to think about that in terms of like how many actual spots are available. And one way I think about this is, so Callie plays volleyball. She's a middle blocker. There are generally only like 3 spots on a volleyball team for a middle blocker. So if she's trying out for a team, the team may be 15 kids, but there are only 3 spots available to her, right? Because she can't fill
Sure.
the other positions. It's sort of the same thing in college admission. So my daughter is a white female. She is not a first gen student. She is a legacy where I went to college, but that's not any of the colleges that she's looking at. She's not going to play sports in college, so she's not an athlete. So that really cuts down the number. So what I do is I go into the common data set and I go to find my student's bucket. So Callie's bucket is first year women who are admitted to that college, right? So if you look up the common data set, you just Google, like if you wanted to look up the Colorado College Common Data Set, just Google Colorado College Common Data Set. It'll come up. It's a PDF. And every college uses like the same PDF format. So it's really easy to follow and find what you're looking for. So the first thing you're going to do is go to section C. That's where first year, first time admissions lives. And you're going to find your student's bucket. So if your student is a female, like mine, female identifying. So let me pause for a second. We understand that gender lives on a continuum and it's not a binary thing. The federal government has not quite caught up with that, right? And so when we are reporting gender splits in the common data set, we report as female and male. So you have to kind of think in that binary if you're not used to doing that. So if I look up the CC common data set and I look for first year females, I'm going to find out that there were about 6,700 female students who applied. And of those, we admitted 919. I can also see the male students. So that's a fun exercise too. Like, let me figure out what the admit rate is for females compared to males. For us, in the most recent common data set, it was about 13-ish% female versus 15% of males were admitted. So I start with that first bucket. Okay, I've got 919 spots available for female students who are going to be admitted to CC. Then the next thing I'm going to do, and this is a little bit tedious and it helps to have your student with you or maybe on another computer, is I'm going to count the number of athletes at my college. And so I'm going to go through every roster. And I did that for CC. I looked at our basketball roster, cross country, lacrosse, soccer, swimming and diving, tennis, all of them. I'm going to count all the athletes. I'm going to add it all up because those athletes may or may not get an extra thumb on the scale when they're admitted to a college. But what I know is that they are taking spots that are not available to my student because my student is not an athlete. So it's not a matter of whether or not the student did or did not deserve to get in. Our student athletes at CC tend to be really high achieving athletes, and they don't always need a few of them, maybe get a tiny thumb on the scale, but generally they don't. Nevertheless, those spots are set aside for them because we need to be able to fill out the basketball team and we need to be able to fill out the volleyball team. So I'm going to add up all those students and then I'm going to divide by 4, right? Because
Sure.
there are 4 grades of students. There are first year, sophomore, junior, senior on those rosters. So at CC, we have 192 female athletes. 1/4 of that is 48. So I started with 919 spots available to women. Now I'm going to subtract 48 from that because those spots are already taken by athletes. So that gets me to 881. So now I'm down to 881 spots available for females at CC out of 6,700. And then I'm going to start thinking about other hooked applicants. So I think you've done a really good job explaining what hooks are to your listeners. So it could be legacies, it could be board of trustee referrals, it could be referrals from legacies. So not students who are legacies, but maybe a teacher who went to CC, who knows a student well, who writes a separate letter to us saying, hey, I know that this student is going to be an amazing fit for CC. I want you to take an extra look at them. Maybe development referrals. So we don't get a ton of students who are flagged for those kind of referrals. So this is a thing you kind of just have to make a guess at. But I would guess.
I have a question for you, Hillary.
Yeah.
Do you put faculty in there as well? Faculty kids?
Yes, we would put faculty in there, and actually any kind of staff. Not that their student is automatically going to be admitted, but like we're going to take
it's a little extra closer look.
Yeah, we're going to take a couple extra minutes to look at that file and give them sort of the benefit of the doubt academically. So my guess, I'd like to see what you think about this, but my guess is that somewhere on the low end of between 1% and 2% of our applicants have some kind of hook like that. Do you think what do you think about that?
I would say even a little higher probably.
Would
Because
you?
you counted development in there. There's
Yeah.
there's
I think
celebrity.
it probably varies
from
celebrity kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it may vary from school to school. I think at CC, my guess would be that it's like 1.5-ish%.
Because think about it, you're bringing in less than 500 kids per year, right?
Right.
In your incoming
Exactly.
class.
Yeah.
So
I'm thinking that's like
1% would be 5 kids total for all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
other
not
schools,
a lot.
Other schools, it's more. You know.
Yeah.
In fact, the guy who wrote the book, The Price of Admissions, he had really done some research on that, and some of the like development. A lot of schools was 2 to 4%, celebrity 2%. So it just depends on the school.
Right. But if we're admitting, say, 900 students, and you look at 1 to 2%, somewhere in there, my guess is that there are 15, right? They're not all going to choose to come to CC.
Sure.
So for our number, I would use 15. That's a guess. I don't actually know what the number is. Just sort of based
I want to stop you
on
for a sec because you really brought up something that's important. And I haven't talked about this before. I've talked about it with families. You do get those. You get the letter from the faculty. You get the letter from the board of trustees. It's not an automatic, but it is a closer look. And I was glad you kind of included that in there.
Yeah.
I know I get a lot of people that ask me, that tell me I know someone who's someone and blah, blah, blah. They can write this. That happens very frequently.
Yeah. And it really does help if the person actually knows the student,
Sure.
like
As
when you
opposed
get
to
a
the
letter
parent.
where they're just writing sort of a generic letter, that's not helpful. And also like just because someone is a big donor or even a big donor in our community who has the potential to be a donor at our college, I mean, I've seen those students denied pretty frequently. So it's not a shoe-in by any stretch, which is why I would keep, like, we certainly get more referrals than that. But I would say that our number is lower because it's not like an automatic in for a student.
And it's also going to be a correlation between that number, I believe, and the selectivity of the school too.
Yes.
So you guys are at 13 to 15%. If you were at 40 to 50%, a lot of those you're telling me about now would end up being in that bucket.
Right. For sure.
Because they're just taking a broader range and you'd be able to get into the range.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay. So I'm going to take out 15 students. So that takes me down to around 860-ish admits. And then I'm going to look at Pell eligible students because my student is not Pell eligible. And it's not that we necessarily give preference to Pell eligible students at CC, although we do give an extra look to students who are first gen, and lots of Pell eligible students are first gen. But again, like there is going to be a certain percentage of the class that are students who are Pell eligible, which means that they are low income, right? And that my student is not. My student is more middle to high income. So those are not seats that are available to her. So for this, you have to go into section B4 of the common data set. And that's actually going to give you an older Pell rate. You could probably Google the college's Pell rate, like that will come up for us in our institutional research section. But since you have the common data set open, it's easy to go to B4 and see. So we are around 14% of our students are Pell eligible, which means that 86% are not. So I'm going to take my last number, which was 860-ish, and I'm going to multiply that by 86%. That's going to bring me to about 740-ish students left.
And I think that's a very fair number. I think for schools like CC, around 14% is pretty common. Yeah. A lot of schools are trying to get to 20, but if they get to 20, there's a pretty big celebration to get there.
Yeah.
The number of students that are Pell eligible in the country is around 34%. Yep. This is something that's changed in the last 15 years. Susan and I were talking about this. Like nobody used to really talk about Pell numbers before, but there's been such a backlash against communities being so affluent that the people have said, why are you neglecting 1/3 of the country?
Yep.
And they're not at your school. Like, does your school look like America? And so it's become a priority to have your school look a little bit more like America, which means more kids like that. And, you know, it's interesting, too, because I actually don't think of Pell as low income. I'd say zero EFC is low income.
Yes.
But you can be $55,000 for a family of 4 and be Pell when the national average for a family of 4 is $63,000. Yes. So Pell is actually, if you're at 90% of the average income, you're Pell eligible. So right. It's in an affluent community, Pell is super low income. But in the scheme of the broader country, at least the kids that are right on the cusp of not qualifying for Pell are actually very close to the national averages. So schools should have kids that are like your average income family. Now, in affluent communities like, you know, CC and a lot of the other liberal arts schools, it is low income compared to the other kids. But I think it's an important point to mention that these Pell kids are actually many times very close to average income families.
Yes, you are absolutely right. They are not an average income at a small liberal arts college,
Correct.
But they are average income across America. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think is interesting is, I don't know if this is true for all colleges, but our Pell rate seems to fluctuate quite a bit from year to year. Like 14%, which is what is coming out of the common data set, is sort of the low end. We had a couple years ago, we were at 19% for that class. So I'm not sure why that jumps up. Maybe that has to do with COVID. Maybe maybe we had sort of a different population of students when COVID was happening. I don't know. I don't have enough institutional sort of knowledge to know.
Could make sense because people stayed closer to home, especially.
Yeah.
I think I haven't seen this data, but it wouldn't surprise me if less resource families were more likely to stay close to home because they haven't traveled as much, and it'd be more of a bigger venture for them to go 500 miles away compared to families that are used to traveling. So that makes intuitive sense.
Yeah. So I pull out those Pell eligible students, and then the last calculation that I do is for race. My student is a white student. The only seats that are available to her are the seats that match her bucket, which is white female students. And so I have to figure that part out. And I don't know what the exact percentages are of the students we admit versus the actual incoming class who accepts our offer, right? Like that is not in the common data set.
Sure.
And I guess at some point I've been told during a meeting what our actual numbers were, but that's like not really written down anywhere, because what we really care about is what is the percentage of students who we end up with and their sort of breakdown of the racial and ethnic diversity. So at CC, 67% of the incoming class last year was white, and that's where my student fits into. So I'm going to take my 740-ish number and multiply that by 67% because that's the percentage that my daughter falls into, and that gets us to around 490-ish students. So we've gone from 919 out of 6,700 who applied, and now we're down to 498. So we're not quite half, but close to half of the admitted students are in buckets that are actually eligible for my student, right, to fill. That looks very different for her than to think like, well, the admit rate to CC is 14% or whatever it was for that year. That feels more generous than 490-ish spots available to me out of 6,700 female students who applied. So I feel like that's just a good exercise. It takes about somewhere between 15 minutes and half an hour, depending on how familiar you are with the common data set. And you don't have to get the numbers perfect. Really, it's just figuring out an estimate so that you can get into your brain like, okay, there are not as many spaces available as I thought there were. And it's going to be a really tough road for me to get one of those 400 whatever spots that's available. And then obviously the more selective the school is, the kind of worse that's going to look, which is good, I think, for us to have that reality check and to be able to create a balanced list because you have a better understanding of really how selective admissions at highly selective schools are.
There are states that can't look at race after the Supreme Court rules on affirmative action. The bucket concept may not apply to race anymore, but schools are still going to be striving to be diverse, even if it's more covert than overt. Well, Hillary, you made me really happy because you referenced the episode you heard from me, which was episode 56. And that was like my favorite episode. So like you rekindled my favorite episode. So you brought back a lot of memories. So that was just at the end of year one. But I want to add a couple more that I didn't hear in there. So international students are usually not in that student of color number.
Right.
And for, I don't know if you want to use CC's numbers.
Yeah, we got to pull out another about 8%.
Yeah, pull out 8%. And you want to do this really for the schools you're looking at. So you're 67% Caucasian. There's schools that are 48, 49% or less.
Yep.
Right. There's schools that have international populations.
Yep.
That are over 20%. I mean, Northeastern, BU, the University of Rochester, New York University, NYU, Brandeis, and Carnegie Mellon are a few more examples of schools that take a lot of international students. These numbers are high.
Yep. Okay, so if we start with 490 students, that's how many we've got left, and we take out the international students, that gets us down to around 455 students. And then if we see what's available for regular action students, so that's about 25% of the class, that brings us down to 114 students. So 114 out of 6,700 who applied.
And I know that some states are smaller than others, but just to put this in perspective, that's about an average of 2 kids per state.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
2 kids per state available in regular action for basically, in your case, that would have been a white female, unhooked, non-athlete that didn't apply through an early program.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Who's like middle or higher upper income.
Yes. Yeah. Correct. You have to put that in. It's not in that 8% Pell, or sorry, not 8, but 14 and 19%. But you used 14 as your number for Pell too.
Yep.
If you would have used 19, it would have chopped even more off, right? Some years.
Yeah. Or if you wanted to, instead of using Pell, like I'm a little bit using Pell as a proxy for first gen students here, but you could go find the first gen number. And there are some schools that are like some of the really top-notch liberal arts schools are 25% first gen,
Yeah.
and they are seeking first gen students
Correct.
as a way to launch those families
Yes.
into sort of higher socioeconomic levels. So like,
Yeah. So that number you used was low because you didn't really take
yeah.
first. There's some first gen that are not Pell,
Yep.
and that's another category that your kid isn't in.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And there's some overlap between those. So I
Sure.
wouldn't want to use them both. I think you have to
Sure.
choose one or the other. But
Yeah.
yeah, like that's it. It really gives you a reality check when you
So there's
see.
basically about 100 kids for
Mhm.
regular for someone that doesn't apply early.
Yep.
And let's talk about what that looks like, Hillary. Like, what does the regular pool look like? Not the ones that there's always a percentage that probably didn't have good counseling and threw their name in there. But what percentage of kids would you say are academically qualified at CC? Would you say overall, if you had to just guess? It's just anecdotal.
From all of our rounds,
Yeah,
I would say around 80%.
yeah. So that's a normal number that I've been. You might have heard I shared 78 the other day was the Dartmouth number. So it's pretty consistently about what I hear. About 80% of kids.
Yeah,
most people at a selective school get the message that if I don't have a strong profile, this is not the place to apply.
Right. Yeah. I think it's a little bit higher during the ED and EA rounds, and then a little bit lower during regular action. I think ours is thrown off a little from other people's because we have no application fee. And that seems to be pretty unusual, even among highly selective colleges, to have no application fee. So yeah, when people want to go to Colorado for college and they're looking for a free app, they send it to us. So those are some of our tend to be the less qualified students. But I would say, yeah, for sure, the majority of students who apply to CC could probably do the work at CC. They're academically ready.
Do this, for an Asian female or for a Black female, and your number is going to be even lower because it's a lower percentage. It's not like this only applies to white females. I mean, obviously there's more.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So everybody, you see how few spots are there. Yep. And it's important to say we are not trying to discourage you through this. There's several things we're trying to do. One is to encourage people to take this into consideration in their list building.
Yep.
Another thing is to be very realistic about the regular round at a highly competitive school, especially that has early decision. Where be really realistic, because when somebody doesn't get in and they kind of sort of thought they probably wouldn't get in, like I talked to one of my students' parents this week, and their child was deferred. Well, we've been talking about this for a long time, and it was an expectation that they would be deferred, and the mom took it extremely well.
Yeah.
Like this is what we expected because she had educated herself. It's very different than if you just feel that complete punch in the gut, like
totally.
Like, I can't believe this happened to me.
Yeah. Or if you let your belief that you have a shot at getting into all of these super highly selective schools, if you let that belief sort of dominate your thinking when you're doing your list building, you're going to end up with a really unbalanced list and an unhappy outcome, right? Like I heard about students last year who didn't get into any of the schools that they applied to, or who only got into the one that was like their safety school, they called it, right? And they weren't actually interested in going to college there. They just applied there because their parent made them or because their counselor made them, so that they would have an option. And that's not a good place to be. Like, we want you to love wherever you end up. And you can't do that if you're being unrealistic about the schools that you're applying to.
Yeah. And so that's the purpose of this. It's not to be, negative Nellies over here. It's if we can get to people ahead of time and cause you to build your list in a way so that you have more schools that you have a higher probability at, then it just benefits you. Yeah. And I feel particularly strongly about it because I don't see a more common problem than imbalanced college lists and unrealistic expectations of where somebody will be competitive. That is unquestionably the single biggest, most common problem I encounter. I mean, the second one I would say would be having an unrealistic expectation of how much of your discretionary money schools are going to ask you to pay, even if they say they meet full demonstrated need. If you're not a full pay family, you're relying on financial aid. That would be a close second. But those are the two biggest problems that I consistently encounter: unrealistic expectations of my child is competitive and unrealistic expectations of what a college will ask me to pay.
I think the only other thing that I would add is unrealistic expectations for what the college is going to offer you when you get there and how perfect it's going to be. Like, I think that one thing that I try to remind students of is like, there is no perfect college out there. Will, if you come to CC and you come here thinking that you're going to love it and there's not going to be any single thing wrong with it, like, you're going to be disappointed because there is going to be something that's going to happen that's going to disappoint you. And so you need to be ready for it not to be perfection, because there is no college that is perfection. And so just be prepared for that kind of, there's going to be some frustration somewhere along the way. And that's just part of the deal.
No, that's a really good point. You know, I like to tell students and parents, think of your own family. Is it perfect? No. Think of your own high school. Is it perfect? No. And guess what? Your college is going to be like your high school. There'll be some things you like and some, and you should see the countenance drop. It was like, that is not what I wanted you to tell me, because that's a problem. That's we've so created that Cinderella concept of thinking that, utopia. And I've been thinking a lot about, this is the downside of emphasizing match and fit too much. You emphasize match and fit so much that people think they're getting their perfect match. So I really appreciate you bringing that in. And you're a little closer to that to me. I mean, I do keep in touch with the families I work with, but I'm seeing the financial and the admission stuff. I see that right on the front end, right? And then the experiences once they're there. So, well, this has been awesome. And Hillary's agreed to come back one more week, and we're going to talk about another important topic. So see you next week, everybody. On Thursday's episode, Julia is my co-pilot. And we're looking at an article called Higher Scoring Students Applying to Selective Colleges Drive Up Applications. It's an article in Higher Ed Drive. Our question from a listener comes from Tricia from California, and she used SpeakPipe. We love SpeakPipe. She wants to know, how does Posse Scholarship work? By the way, SpeakPipe is when you speak your question and we get to hear your voice and you become part of our podcast. You just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK. Our interview is our final part with Brian Hodges, the Senior Associate Director of Admissions at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and we're talking about understanding University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And Linda's back, and she joins me as we do a college spotlight on Whittier College. And friends, I leave you with a new quote. It's not a new theme, it's not a new motto, but it's a new quote. And it's by a basketball coach named Tim Noetke. He made this quote famous, and I love this quote, and it simply says this: hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Did you catch that? Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 14. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel, and to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stylianos Dimitriou. If you want to have a coaching session with Lisa or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Thursday.